At my dad's funeral, my brother Michael stood up and said the words that would haunt him forever. "She's just here for the money. Dad's going to cut her off." Every head in that packed funeral home turned to stare at me, Sarah Thompson, the supposed black sheep of the prestigious Thompson family. Little did they know, the USB drive that lawyer Roberts was carrying would expose secrets that would destroy their perfect little world forever. But let me take you back to where this nightmare began, because what happened next will shock you to your core. Growing up as a Thompson meant everything was already decided for you. We lived in this massive colonial house in Greenwich, Connecticut. You know, the kind with the perfectly manicured lawn and the Mercedes in every spot of the 3-car garage. My father, David Thompson Sr., was the founding partner of Thompson & Associates, one of the most prestigious law firms in the state. My mother had passed away when I was 12, leaving Dad to raise 4 kids who were all expected to follow in his footsteps. Michael, my oldest brother at 35, was Dad's golden boy, already a partner at the firm, married to the perfect socialite wife, living in a house that could have been on the cover of Better Homes and Gardens. Patricia, 32, had her own practice specializing in family law, and never let anyone forget she graduated summa cum laude from Yale. Then there was David Jr., 28, fresh out of law school and climbing the ladder at a corporate firm in Manhattan. And then there was me, 26-year-old Sarah, who committed the ultimate Thompson family sin. I wanted to be an artist. I remember the exact moment I told Dad about my dreams. I was 19, home for Christmas break from my pre-law studies at Columbia, studies I absolutely hated. We were sitting in his study, this wood-paneled room that smelled like leather and expensive cigars, and I just couldn't pretend anymore. "Dad, I need to tell you something," I said, my hands shaking as I held my portfolio. "I want to transfer to art school. I want to study painting." The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. But then Dad did something that surprised everyone, including me. He smiled, not the fake smile he gave clients, but a real one. "Sarah, sweetheart," he said, leaning back in his chair, "show me what you've been working on." For the next hour, Dad looked through every single piece in my portfolio. He asked questions about my techniques, about what inspired each painting, about my favorite artists. When Michael walked in and saw us, his face went white. "Dad, what's this about?" Michael demanded, eyeing my paintings like they were contaminated. "Your sister has real talent, Michael," Dad said quietly. "Look at this landscape. The way she captures light is remarkable." That was the beginning of the end for my relationship with my siblings. What they didn't know was that Dad had always been different when it was just the two of us. While they saw the stern patriarch who built a legal empire, I saw the man who would sneak into my room when I was little to read me bedtime stories, who taught me how to ride a bike in secret because he didn't want my brothers saying it wasn't ladylike, who kept every single drawing I'd made him since I was 5 years old. Dad supported my decision to transfer to the Rhode Island School of Design, but he made one request. "Don't tell your siblings yet. Let me handle them." I should have known that was a red flag, but I was so grateful to have his support that I didn't question it. The family dinners became torture after that. Every Sunday, we'd gather around that massive dining room table, and it was like walking into a courtroom where I was always the defendant. "Sarah's still wasting her time with finger paints," Patricia would say, cutting her prime rib with surgical precision. "It's embarrassing to tell my colleagues that my sister chose art over following in Dad's footsteps." "She'll grow out of it," Michael would add, never looking directly at me. "Dad's just being patient, but patience has limits." David Jr. was the worst. He'd make comments like, "I hope Sarah realizes that when Dad retires, the firm's assets will go to actual lawyers, not wannabe Picassos." Then he'd laugh like it was the funniest thing in the world. And Dad? Dad would sit there in silence, never defending me, never correcting them. I started to wonder if his private support was just pity, if he was secretly ashamed of me too. The isolation started slowly. First, I stopped getting invited to Patricia's dinner parties. Then Michael's wife would forget to include me in family photos at gatherings. Holiday celebrations became minefields where every conversation was designed to make me feel like an outsider. "Oh, Sarah's here," Patricia said at Easter dinner during my junior year. I'm surprised you could tear yourself away from your hobby. It's not a hobby, I said quietly, but my voice was drowned out by David Jr.'s loud laugh. Come on, sis. When are you going to get serious about your future? Dad won't be around forever to subsidize your art camp. That's when I realized they thought Dad was just humoring me, that eventually he'd cut off my tuition and force me back into law school. They had no idea that Dad was not only paying for school, but had started buying my paintings, quietly through intermediaries, so I wouldn't know it was him. The gaslighting became systematic. They'd have family meetings about important decisions and forget to tell me. They'd plan vacations and suddenly there'd be no room for me. When I'd confront them, they'd act confused. Oh, Sarah, we thought you wouldn't be interested, Michael would say with that patronizing smile. You're always so busy with your projects. Or Patricia, we didn't want to interrupt your artistic process. Isn't that what artists need? Solitude? The worst part was the love bombing that would follow. Just when I was ready to cut them off completely, one of them would reach out with some gesture of fake affection. Michael would send expensive art supplies with a note saying he was proud of his little sister. Patricia would invite me to lunch and spend 2 hours talking about how much she missed our girl time. David Jr. would text me memes and act like we were best friends again, but it never lasted. Within weeks, I'd be back to being the family disappointment, the ungrateful daughter who chose selfishness over family tradition. By my senior year, I was barely speaking to any of them. I'd come home for holidays because Dad would call and specifically ask me to, but I felt like a ghost in my own family. They'd talk around me, about me, but never to me. I was becoming a stranger in the house where I grew up. That's when Dad started getting sick. It started with little things, forgetting appointments, getting winded climbing stairs, losing weight. But Dad was stubborn, and for months he brushed off our concerns. When he finally went to the doctor, the diagnosis hit like a thunderbolt. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4, maybe 6 months to live. Suddenly, everyone wanted to be the devoted child. Michael took leave from the firm to help Dad with business transitions. Patricia moved back into the family house to coordinate care. David Jr. quit his job to become Dad's full-time companion. And me? I was still in Rhode Island, finishing my senior thesis, when I got the call from Michael. Dad's asking for you, he said, and for the first time in years, his voice wasn't dripping with condescension. You need to come home, Sarah. Now. When I walked into Dad's bedroom, I barely recognized him. The strong, imposing man who'd built a legal empire had shrunk to this fragile figure propped up by pillows. But his eyes were still sharp, still intelligent, still filled with love when he looked at me. There's my artist, he whispered, reaching for my hand. I've been waiting for you. That night, Dad made a request that would change everything. I want you to move back home, Sarah, these last few months. I want my family together. So I did. I put my life on hold, my art on hold, my future on hold, and moved back into my childhood bedroom to take care of my dying father. But my siblings, they saw this as proof of what they'd always suspected. Look who finally shows up when there's an inheritance on the line, Patricia whispered to Michael when she thought I couldn't hear. 5 years of playing the struggling artist, and now she's ready to play the devoted daughter, Michael replied. How convenient. David Jr. was more direct. Dad, you see what she's doing, right? She's here for the will reading, not for you. But Dad never responded to their accusations. In fact, during those final months, something strange started happening. The sicker Dad got, the more he wanted to spend time alone with me. He'd send the others away on errands, Michael to handle firm business, Patricia to deal with legal matters, David Jr. to manage medical appointments. And then we'd have these long, quiet conversations. He'd ask about my paintings, about my dreams, about the life I wanted to build. He'd tell me stories about Mom that I'd never heard, about how she'd wanted to be a writer before she married him, about how he sometimes wondered what would have happened if she'd followed her dreams instead of his. Your mother would be so proud of you, Sarah, he told me one afternoon while my siblings were out. You chose authenticity over approval. That takes courage I never had. Those words meant everything to me, but they also felt like a goodbye. Dad was slipping away, and I could feel my siblings getting more resentful with every day that passed. The final blow came 3 days before Dad died. I was in the kitchen making Dad's afternoon tea when I heard voices from the study. My siblings were having another one of their meetings. "She's manipulating him," Patricia was saying, her voice sharp with anger. "All these years of playing the victim, and now she's swooped in to play nursemaid while we've been holding the family business together." "Dad's vulnerable right now," Michael added. "He's sentimental about Mom, and Sarah reminds him of her, but we can't let emotions override logic. The firm, the family assets, they belong with family members who've actually contributed." "I say we talk to him directly," David Jr. said. "Make it clear that if Sarah's expecting some big inheritance payout, she's going to be disappointed. Dad built this empire for lawyers, not for finger painters." I stood there in the kitchen, hands shaking as I held Dad's teacup, and realized that even in his final days, my siblings saw me as nothing more than a threat to their financial future. That night, I made a decision. I wouldn't fight them anymore. I wouldn't defend myself or argue about my worthiness or try to prove my love for Dad. I would just be there for him, quietly, authentically, the way I'd always been. But I had no idea that Dad had been listening to their conversations too. When Dad passed away 3 days later, peacefully in his sleep with me holding his hand, my siblings' true colors came out immediately. "Finally," Michael said, actually said the word finally as we stood around Dad's deathbed. "Now we can get back to normal." "The funeral needs to be perfect," Patricia announced, already switching into lawyer mode. "Full military honors, flowers from the governor, every judge in the state. This is about the Thompson legacy." "And the will reading," David Jr. added, rubbing his hands together like he was warming them by a fire. "I assume Roberts will handle it right after the service?" I just stared at them, horrified. Our father had been dead for exactly 12 minutes, and they were already planning how to divide up his assets. The funeral was everything they wanted, a spectacle designed to showcase the Thompson family's power and prestige. The church was packed with judges, politicians, business leaders, and every lawyer in a 50-mile radius. My siblings played their parts perfectly, giving eloquent speeches about Dad's legacy and his devotion to justice, but I could feel the whispers, see the pointing, hear the speculation. "That's the artistic daughter, the one who broke David's heart by rejecting the family business. Wonder if she'll get anything in the will." And that's when Michael decided to make his grand announcement. We were standing by Dad's casket during the viewing, accepting condolences from a seemingly endless line of mourners, when Michael suddenly raised his voice loud enough for half the funeral home to hear, "She's just here for the money. Dad's going to cut her off." The entire room went silent. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned to stare at me. I felt the heat of 100 pairs of eyes, the weight of their judgment, the suffocating pressure of their expectations. Patricia stepped up beside Michael, her voice carrying that same courtroom authority. "Sarah made her choice years ago. Dad was very clear about rewarding family members who honored his legacy." David Jr. laughed, actually laughed at our father's funeral. 5 years of art school, and now she thinks she deserves an equal share? Dad was too polite to cut her off while he was alive, but his will? That'll tell the real story. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to run out of that funeral home and never look back. The shame was overwhelming. Not shame at Dad's death, but shame at having my family humiliate me in front of everyone who mattered in Dad's world. But then I saw him. Lawyer Roberts, Dad's longtime friend and the executor of his will, standing in the doorway with something in his hand, something that would change everything, a USB drive. As Roberts walked toward us, his face was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, something that looked almost like anticipation. The room stayed silent as he approached, everyone sensing that something significant was about to happen. "The family is all here," Roberts said quietly, his voice somehow carrying across the silent room. David left specific instructions about when and where his will should be read. Michael stepped forward, confidence radiating from every pore. "Of course. We can do it privately after the service, can't we? No need to make a public spectacle. But Roberts shook his head. I'm afraid not, Michael. Your father was very specific. He wanted his final words to be heard by everyone who mattered to him, everyone who's here today. That's when I noticed the funeral home staff wheeling in a large screen and a laptop setup. My heart started pounding as I realized what was about to happen. Ladies and gentlemen, Roberts announced, his voice now projecting across the entire room. David Thompson has left a video message to be played before his will is read. He specifically requested that all family, friends, and colleagues witness his final words. The lights dimmed. The screen flickered to life. And there was Dad. He looked stronger on the screen than he had in months, sitting in his study with that familiar background of law books and family photos. But his expression was different. There was a steel in his eyes that I hadn't seen since I was a child, the same look he used to get in the courtroom when he was about to destroy an opponent's argument. The room was absolutely silent as Dad looked directly into the camera and spoke his first 3 words. Sarah, my daughter. My heart stopped. He wasn't addressing the room, or the family, or his colleagues. He was talking directly to me. If you're watching this, it means I'm gone, and it means your siblings have probably spent the last few days making their true feelings known. Michael's face went white. Patricia actually took a step backward. David Jr.'s mouth fell open. Dad continued, his voice growing stronger. I want everyone in this room to know something about my daughter, Sarah. She is the only one of my children who chose love over money, authenticity over approval, courage over comfort. She is the only one who saw me as a father instead of a bank account. The whispers started then, rippling through the crowd like a wave. I could see people turning to look at my siblings, then back at me, then back at the screen. For the past 5 years, my other children have treated Sarah like a disappointment, a failure, an embarrassment to the family name. They made her feel unwelcome at family gatherings, excluded her from important decisions, and convinced themselves that her choice to pursue art was somehow a betrayal of everything I stood for. Dad paused, and I swear I could see a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. What they didn't know was that I've been secretly purchasing Sarah's paintings through a private collector for the past 3 years. Her work hangs in my private office, in my bedroom, throughout this house, because she is the most talented artist I have ever encountered, and I am proud, so incredibly proud, to be her father. The gasps were audible now. I felt tears streaming down my face as I realized Dad had not only supported my dreams, but had been celebrating them in secret. But he wasn't finished. Michael, Patricia, David Jr., you have spent years planning for this moment, calculating your inheritance, measuring your worth by what I might leave behind. You turned my funeral into a business meeting before my body was even cold. The crowd was shifting now, uncomfortable with the public nature of this family reckoning, but unable to look away. You want to know what I think about money, about legacy, about who deserves what? Let me be very clear. Dad leaned forward and his voice became quieter but somehow more powerful. Sarah is inheriting 80% of my estate, including full ownership of Thompson & Associates, all real estate holdings, and the family trust. She will also receive my personal collection of art, including the 23 original Sarah Thompson paintings I've been secretly collecting. The silence was deafening. I literally could not breathe. Michael, you receive $1 with this message for calling my daughter a disappointment when you were the one who disappointed me most. Michael stumbled backward like he'd been physically struck. Patricia, you receive $1 with this message for making my daughter feel unwelcome in her own family home. Patricia's face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. David Jr., you receive $1 with this message for laughing at your sister's dreams when you never had the courage to dream at all. David Jr. just stood there, mouth opening and closing like a fish. But Dad wasn't done. His expression softened as he looked back at the camera, back at me. Sarah, my beautiful, brave, authentic daughter, you are getting everything not because you were the favorite, but because you were the only one who loved me without conditions, the only one who saw me as a person instead of a provider. The only one who chose your own path, even when it meant walking alone. I was sobbing now, years of pain and rejection and feeling worthless just pouring out of me. Use this inheritance to build the life you've always dreamed of. Support other artists who need someone to believe in them. Turn our family law firm into something that would make your mother proud, maybe a foundation that helps people who've been rejected by their families find their way. The screen flickered, and for a moment I thought it was over. But then Dad appeared again, and this time he was holding something. A painting. My painting. The first one I'd ever given him. A clumsy landscape I'd painted when I was 8 years old. And to everyone else in this room who witnessed my children's behavior today, now you know who the real Thompson legacy belongs to. Sarah never needed my money or my approval to be worthy. She was always worthy. She was always enough. The screen went black. The silence that followed was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. 300 people in that funeral home, and you could have heard a pin drop. I looked at my siblings, my former siblings, and saw my entire childhood rewritten in their faces. All those years of feeling like the outsider, the disappointment, the black sheep. And it turned out I was the only one Dad truly respected. Michael was the first to speak, his voice barely a whisper. This can't be real. He can't have meant... But Roberts was already opening his briefcase, pulling out official documents. I'm afraid it's very real, Michael. This will has been notarized, witnessed, and filed according to Connecticut state law. Your father spent the last 6 months making absolutely certain that his wishes would be carried out exactly as stated. That's when the dam broke. The dam broke, and everything I thought I knew about my life came crashing down around me. Patricia was the first to completely lose it. "This is impossible," she screamed, her perfectly composed funeral demeanor shattering like glass. "Dad was manipulated. Sarah poisoned his mind against us during those final months." Michael grabbed Roberts by the arm, his face twisted with desperation. "There has to be a way to contest this. Dad wasn't in his right mind. The cancer, the medications, the pain. No rational person would what, Michael?" I found my voice for the first time since Dad's video ended. "Would leave his estate to the daughter who actually loved him instead of the children who saw him as a retirement plan?" The words came out stronger than I expected, and the entire room turned to look at me. For 26 years I'd been the quiet one, the peacekeeper, the one who absorbed their cruelty in silence. But standing there, surrounded by 300 witnesses to my father's final vindication, something fundamental shifted inside me. David Jr. was backing away from me like I'd suddenly burst into flames. "Sarah, you have to understand, we never meant... We were just protecting the family business. We thought..." "You thought wrong," I said, and my voice carried across that silent funeral home with a clarity that surprised even me. "For 5 years, you made me feel like I was worthless, like I was a burden, like I didn't deserve to be part of this family. And the whole time, Dad was secretly buying my paintings and hanging them in his bedroom." The crowd was mesmerized now, watching this family drama unfold like some twisted soap opera. I could see phones coming out, people starting to record. The Thompson family meltdown was about to become very public, very quickly. Roberts cleared his throat, regaining control of the situation. "If we could perhaps continue this discussion in private..." "No." The word came out of my mouth before I could stop it. Dad wanted this public. He wanted everyone here to witness this moment, to understand what really happened in our family. So let's finish what he started. I turned to face my siblings directly, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of them. "Michael, you spent every family dinner for 5 years making sure I knew I was a disappointment. You told everyone I was wasting Dad's money, embarrassing the family name, being selfish and ungrateful. But you know what? The whole time you were saying that, Dad was secretly commissioning pieces from me. He wasn't ashamed of my art, he was collecting it." Michael's face had gone from white to gray. "Sarah, please, we can work this out. The firm needs experienced leadership, and you don't know anything about running a business." "You're right, I don't," I said, and I could see relief flooding his face until I continued. That's why the first thing I'm going to do is hire a management company to evaluate every decision you've made as partner, every case you've taken, every client you've billed, every expense account you've submitted. Dad trusted you to run his life's work, and I want to make sure you were worthy of that trust. The color drained from Michael's face entirely. I wondered what skeletons were hiding in his expense reports. I turned to Patricia next. And you, every time I came home for holidays, you made sure I knew I wasn't welcome. We didn't think you'd be interested. We thought you needed your artistic space. You excluded me from family events and then acted confused when I called you out on it. Patricia was crying now, mascara streaming down her cheeks. Sarah, I was trying to give you freedom to pursue your dreams. By making me feel like a stranger in my own home, by hosting dinner parties and forgetting to invite me, by rolling your eyes every time I talked about my work? I shook my head. That wasn't freedom, Patricia. That was exile. Finally, I looked at David Jr., my baby brother who'd grown up to become my cruelest tormentor. And you. You were the worst of all because you should have understood. You were only 2 years older than me. We should have been allies. Instead, you turned into their attack dog. David Jr. was openly weeping now. Sarah, please, I was just trying to fit in with them. I was trying to be the son Dad wanted. By tearing down the daughter he actually loved? The words hung in the air like a slap. Dad didn't want carbon copies of himself, David. He wanted children who would make him proud in their own ways. But you were all so busy competing with each other for his approval that you never noticed he'd already given it to me. Roberts stepped forward again, his voice gentle but firm. Perhaps we should move to the formal reading of the will now. There are additional provisions that need to be discussed. I nodded, suddenly feeling the weight of what had just happened. 300 people had just watched me dismantle my siblings in the middle of our father's funeral. The story would be all over social media within hours, in the local papers by tomorrow, probably picked up by law journals within the week. The Thompson family's dirty laundry was now public record. Roberts began reading the formal legal language of the will, but I was barely listening. I was watching the faces in the crowd, some shocked, some sympathetic, some clearly enjoying the spectacle. I saw judges Dad had worked with for decades, colleagues from the firm, family friends who'd watched us grow up. They were all seeing my siblings' true colors for the first time. But then Roberts got to a section that snapped my attention back to the present. In addition to the primary bequests, he read, David Thompson has left the following instructions regarding the family business. Thompson and Associates will be restructured under Sarah's ownership as a foundation dedicated to supporting artists who have been rejected or disowned by their families. The firm's legal expertise will be used to help young artists protect their intellectual property, negotiate contracts, and build sustainable careers. I felt my knees go weak. Dad hadn't just left me money. He'd left me a mission. Roberts continued. Furthermore, the Thompson family home will be converted into artist residencies, providing housing and studio space for up to 12 artists at a time. The goal is to create the supportive, creative family that Sarah never had. The irony was breathtaking. Dad was literally replacing my biological family with a chosen family of artists. Michael Thompson, Patricia Thompson, and David Thompson Jr. are hereby prohibited from entering the family property or contacting Sarah Thompson for a period of 5 years, except through legal counsel regarding the dissolution of their previous involvement with Thompson and Associates. A restraining order. Dad had built a restraining order into his will. The reading continued for another 20 minutes, covering trust funds, property transfers, and legal technicalities. But the core message was clear. Sarah gets everything, siblings get nothing, and they're banned from trying to fix it for 5 years. When Roberts finally finished, the funeral home was still dead silent. Then, slowly, people began to move. Some approached me with condolences that felt different now, respectful instead of pitying. Others avoided eye contact entirely, clearly uncomfortable with having witnessed such a public family destruction. My siblings, meanwhile, were in complete meltdown mode. Patricia grabbed my arm as I walked past her. Sarah, please, we can share the inheritance. You don't need everything. I pulled away gently but firmly. Patricia, this isn't about the money. This is about Dad finally telling the truth about who we really are. Michael was already on his phone, presumably calling lawyers to discuss contesting the will. David Jr. was just standing there, staring at Dad's casket like he couldn't believe what had just happened. But the most surreal moment came when Mrs. Henderson, our elderly next-door neighbor, approached me with tears in her eyes. "Sarah, dear," she said, taking my hands in hers, "your father talked about you constantly. Every time I saw him working in his garden these past few months, he would tell me about your latest painting, about shows you were in, about how proud he was. He said you were the bravest person he knew." That's when I realized the full scope of what had been happening. While my siblings were convinced Dad was ashamed of me, he was actually bragging about me to the neighbors. Over the next few hours, similar stories emerged. Dad's doctor mentioned that he kept photos of my artwork on his phone and would show them during appointments. His barber said Dad had commissioned a piece from me as a surprise for the office. Even Roberts revealed that Dad had been planning to surprise me with a gallery showing of all the paintings he'd secretly purchased. My father hadn't just loved me. He'd been my biggest fan. The funeral reception was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Instead of the typical somber gathering, it felt more like the world's most awkward victory party. People kept approaching me with congratulations that felt more appropriate for a wedding than a funeral. "Sarah, your father would be so proud of how you handled yourself today," said Judge Morrison, one of Dad's oldest friends. "That took real courage standing up to your siblings like that," added Mrs. Chen from the art gallery downtown. "Your father was right. You are the bravest person he knew," whispered Dr. Patterson, Dad's oncologist. Meanwhile, my siblings were huddled in a corner with a handful of lawyers, frantically discussing legal options. I could hear fragments of their conversation: undue influence, mental incapacity, statute of limitations, grounds for appeal. Let them plot, I thought. Dad had spent 6 months preparing for this moment. He'd made sure his will was bulletproof. The real revelation came 3 days later, when I was finally alone in Dad's house, my house now, going through his personal effects. I found a locked drawer in his desk, and inside was a folder labeled Sarah's Journey. It contained everything. Every newspaper clipping about local art shows I'd participated in. Every review of my work, even the bad ones. Photos he'd taken of my paintings hanging in his office, his bedroom, even the guest bathroom. Receipts for art supplies he'd had delivered to my dorm, always anonymously. But the most devastating discovery was a handwritten letter dated just 2 weeks before his death. "My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, it means I didn't have the courage to say these words to your face, and I'm more sorry about that than you'll ever know. You are not the family disappointment. You never were. You are the family's greatest success story, and I failed you by not making that clear every single day of your life. Your siblings love you, but they love the idea of family legacy more. They couldn't understand that you weren't rejecting our values, you were expanding them. You took the Thompson dedication to justice and applied it to art, to beauty, to truth. You took our family's commitment to fighting for the underdog and became the underdog who fought for herself. I should have defended you at those family dinners. I should have told them to stop treating you like an outsider. I should have made it clear that choosing your own path wasn't betrayal. It was evolution. Instead, I took the coward's way out. I supported you privately while allowing them to hurt you publicly. I told myself I was keeping the peace, but really I was just avoiding conflict. And you paid the price for my weakness. The inheritance isn't a reward, sweetheart. It's an apology. And it's my way of finally giving you the resources to build the family you deserve. A family that celebrates your gifts instead of resenting them. Use Thompson & Associates to help other artists who've been told they're not good enough, not practical enough, not valuable enough. Turn our family business into something beautiful. Create the support system I should have given you from the beginning. And please, if you can find it in your heart, forgive your siblings eventually. They're not evil. They're just scared. Scared of not being enough. Scared of not living up to expectations. Scared of being left behind. They attacked you because they saw you succeeding on your own terms while they were still trying to earn approval. but don't let them back into your life until they've learned to value you for who you are, not what you can give them. You are my greatest achievement, Sarah. Not the law firm, not the reputation, not the money. You. Your courage, your authenticity, your refusal to compromise your dreams for anyone else's comfort. Make me proud, sweetheart. Though honestly, you already have, every single day, just by being yourself. All my love, Dad. I sat in his study, surrounded by law books and family photos, and cried harder than I had since the day he died. All those years of feeling like a disappointment, like a burden, like the family failure, and he'd been proud of me the entire time. The transformation of Thompson and Associates began immediately. I hired a management consulting firm to audit the books, partly to ensure everything was legitimate and partly because I genuinely wanted to understand what I'd inherited. What I found was remarkable. The firm was incredibly successful, worth almost $50 million, with a client list that read like a who's who of Connecticut's elite. Dad hadn't just built a law practice, he'd created an institution. More importantly, the audit revealed that Michael had been running the firm ethically and efficiently. Whatever his faults as a brother, he was actually a brilliant lawyer and a competent manager. Patricia's independent practice was also highly regarded, and David Jr. had been rising rapidly at his corporate firm. They were all successful, accomplished people, which made their treatment of me even more puzzling. They didn't need Dad's money or approval. They already had both. So why had they been so threatened by my choice to pursue art? The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Martinez, the family therapist Dad had been seeing during his final months. "Your father asked me to reach out to you after his death," she explained during our first session. "He wanted you to understand the psychological dynamics at play in your family." Over the next hour, Dr. Martinez painted a picture of a family trapped by their own success. Dad had built such a powerful legacy that his children felt they had to live up to it or be considered failures. My choice to pursue art wasn't just different. It was threatening because it suggested there might be other ways to find fulfillment and value. Your siblings attacked you not because they thought you were wrong, but because they were afraid you might be right, she explained. If Sarah could be happy and successful as an artist, what did that say about their choices to sacrifice their own dreams for family expectations? It was a revelation that changed everything. My siblings hadn't been cruel because they were evil. They'd been cruel because they were trapped. But that didn't excuse their behavior. Understanding someone's motivations doesn't obligate you to accept their treatment. The final confrontation came 6 weeks after the funeral. Michael, Patricia, and David Jr. showed up at the house together, apparently having exhausted their legal options to contest the will. I found them standing on the front porch, looking like children who'd been caught breaking rules. "Sarah," Michael said quietly, "we need to talk." I invited them into the living room, the same room where we'd had so many terrible family dinners. But now the dynamic was completely different. They were visitors in my house, supplicants asking for forgiveness. "We've been to therapy," Patricia said, her voice small. "Both together and individually. We're beginning to understand how badly we treated you." "We were jealous," David Jr. admitted, tears already starting. "You had the courage to follow your dreams, and we were stuck following Dad's. We resented you for being free when we felt trapped." Michael nodded. "We made you the scapegoat for our own fears about not being good enough, not being brave enough, not being authentic enough." I listened to their apologies, their explanations, their promises to do better, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, not forgiveness. Just a kind of distant sadness for the family we could have been. "I appreciate you coming here," I said finally, "and I'm glad you're getting help, but I'm not ready to have you back in my life." The hurt in their faces was genuine, but I continued. "For 5 years, you made me feel unwelcome, unwanted, and unworthy. You damaged my relationship with Dad by making me think he was ashamed of me. You turned family gatherings into endurance tests and made me dread coming home." I stood up, walking to the window that overlooked Dad's garden. "The will isn't just about money. It's about truth. Dad finally told the truth about who we all really are, and the truth is that I don't need your approval anymore. I don't need your acceptance or your validation or your inclusion. I turned back to face them. I'm building a new life now. A real family, made up of people who celebrate each other instead of competing with each other, people who lift each other up instead of tearing each other down, people who love unconditionally instead of keeping score. The artist residency program was already taking shape. 12 young artists from across the country, all of whom had been rejected or unsupported by their families, would move into the Thompson house within the next 6 months. The converted law firm would provide them with legal support, business guidance, and career development resources. We were calling it the David Thompson Foundation for Authentic Family, and it was going to change lives. I hope you can all find happiness, I told my siblings. I hope you can learn to support each other the way families should, and maybe in a few years we can try to build something new together. But not now. Now I need to focus on healing and growing and becoming the person Dad always saw in me. They left quietly, and I never saw them again. 6 months later, the Thompson house was filled with laughter and creativity and the kind of chaotic energy that comes from passionate people pursuing their dreams. My chosen family included painters and sculptors and photographers and writers, all of whom understood what it meant to choose authenticity over approval. The foundation was helping dozens of artists protect their work, negotiate better contracts, and build sustainable careers. We'd already prevented 3 young artists from signing exploitative deals and helped one recover stolen intellectual property worth over $100,000. But the most meaningful moment came when I hung Dad's secret collection of my paintings in the foundation's main gallery. 23 pieces spanning 8 years, from my clumsy college attempts to my most recent professional work. Under each painting was a small plaque with a quote from Dad's hidden notes about that piece. Things like, "Sarah's use of light in this landscape shows remarkable technical skill and emotional insight." Or, "This portrait captures something profound about human vulnerability. Sarah has a gift for seeing into people's souls." The opening reception was packed with judges, lawyers, artists, and community leaders. The same people who'd witnessed my family's meltdown at Dad's funeral were now celebrating my transformation of his legacy. Judge Morrison approached me during the reception, a glass of wine in his hand and tears in his eyes. "Your father would be so proud, Sarah. You've taken his greatest strength, his ability to fight for people who couldn't fight for themselves, and applied it in a completely new way." He paused, looking around at the room full of young artists sharing their work with potential mentors and supporters. "This isn't just a foundation, it's a revolution. You're changing the entire conversation about what family means, about what success looks like, about what it means to honor a legacy." As the evening wound down and I walked through the house that had once felt like a prison, I realized Dad had been right about one thing. The best revenge against people who tried to make you smaller is to become magnificently, authentically yourself. I was no longer Sarah Thompson, the family disappointment. I was Sarah Thompson, founder of a foundation that was changing lives, creator of a chosen family built on love and support, and the daughter who finally understood that she'd been enough all along. Dad's final gift wasn't the money or the house or even the vindication. It was the permission to stop apologizing for who I was and start celebrating it instead. The little girl who used to hide her paintings under her bed was now running a gallery. The teenager who felt like a stranger at family dinners was now hosting gatherings where everyone belonged. The young woman who thought she had to choose between family and dreams had created a space where others would never have to make that choice. I had everything I'd ever wanted: a family that supported my dreams, work that mattered, and the knowledge that I was exactly who I was meant to be. And somewhere, I knew Dad was smiling.